The HOA president just handed over my lakefront property to her casino without even asking me. That's the message I fired off to my lawyer the moment I uncovered what I can only describe as the boldest case of property theft I've ever encountered. This woman literally gave away my waterfront to her cash-strapped cousin, backed by forged legal paperwork, all under the pretense of community improvement. The nerve was beyond belief. They acted like they had some rightful claim to land I personally paid for. But here's the thing, if you're going to mess with an architect who's well versed in property law, expect consequences. Let's just say I created something that left them speechless. And the HOA president, she completely unraveled when she saw what I had built. And Drama-nest viewers, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. This revenge tale is about to escalate like never before. Let me walk you through the key players in this disaster. I'm Tom Reynolds, a 38-year-old architect who designed the perfect lakeside home in Willowbrook Estates. I've been raising my daughter alone for the past 2 years, ever since I lost my wife, Sarah, to cancer. My daughter, Emma, is 8. She's passionate about drawing, adores swimming, and dreams of one day owning her own water slide. Then there's Patty Morrison. She's 55, newly elected president of our HOA for the past 6 months, a retired tax assessor with a thirst for power that rivals Napoleon marching into new territory. Her cousin, Linda Hartwell, is 50, a recently widowed woman who went bankrupt paying off her husband's medical expenses and is now in dire need of money. And finally, we have Ron Peterson, our 60-year-old neighbor who served as a city clerk for 25 years and knows HOA regulations better than anyone else. Every morning, Emma and I had a cherished ritual. We'd sit together by the lake, the water so clear you could see to the bottom. I'd sip my coffee while Emma sketched ideas for her dream waterscape. This is why I chose architecture to create meaningful moments like those. After Sarah passed, that lake became our sanctuary. Our home is situated on a prime piece of lakefront property, 120 feet of pristine shoreline, a private dock, and old-growth oak trees shading the yard. I purchased this lot precisely for its lake access. The deed is clear and undisputed. The land extending to the high water mark is ours. Patty Morrison arrived in our peaceful neighborhood with all the subtlety of a military invasion. In her first week, she launched a neighborhood beautification initiative. Sounded harmless at first. Then came a barrage of rules, strict lawn height regulations down to a single inch, bans on wind chimes due to noise pollution, and required permits for even the smallest yard decorations. By week 3, Patty was appointing her family members to newly created HOA enforcement roles. That's when the harassment began. I was fined $150 because my grass measured 1.1 inches. Emma's tiny paper boats were banned from the lake for supposedly threatening the water quality. Even the cherished wind chime I'd kept since Sarah's passing had to be removed immediately. This is about upholding community standards, Mr. Reynolds, Patty said smugly. Some people need structure. It didn't take long to see what was really going on. Jimmy Morris, Patty's husband, suddenly became the neighborhood's landscape inspector, raking in $3,000 a month. Nancy Walsh, one of Patty's golf buddies, landed an exclusive $12,000 contract for pool maintenance. Ron Peterson got slapped with a $300 fine for placing a garden gnome without permission. It was obvious Patty was constructing a miniature empire, and anyone who dared oppose her was punished. Our once quiet and friendly community turned into a surveillance zone. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones at the grocery store. Kids stopped playing outside, afraid of breaking the newest mysterious rule. The freedom we once knew was being replaced by authoritarian community standards. Then came Linda Hartwell, Patty's cousin, like a storm front. Her backstory made her an easy pawn in Patty's game. A new widow, left financially ruined by medical debt, desperate for a way out. On her first day, movers unloaded furniture that screamed high-end luxury: $2,000 lounge chairs, a top-tier Marshall sound system, professional-grade tiki torches. By the second day, construction crews were already tearing up land. No posted permits, no HOA notifications. Day 3, a towering $10,000 water slide appeared, complete with a concrete base that stretched right into the lake. Its placement was no accident. It took over the entire shared lakefront, blocking off access for every other resident. Families who once swam there now had nowhere to go. The first major confrontation crushed me. Emma had run toward the slide, her eyes full of joy. "Daddy, can I go on the slide? It looks amazing," she asked. Linda's voice cut through her excitement like ice. "This is private property, little girl. Go play somewhere else." Emma returned to me, eyes wet and heartbroken. "Daddy, why can't I swim in our own backyard anymore? The lady says I'm not allowed." The architect and me immediately noticed red flags: no visible permits, property lines being violated, safety hazards plain to see from yards away. Linda, of course, waved an official-looking document stamped with the whole letterhead like it was a royal proclamation. "Temporary lakefront usage grant approved by HOA board." Across the top, in bold letters, "Gift of community lakefront access." She waved the paper with the confidence of someone who'd just won a grand prize. "Patty gave this to me," she beamed. "She said the neighborhood voted to gift our family this beautiful area for everyone's benefit. It's a family gift from the HOA." Her repeated use of the word gift made my skin crawl. This wasn't kindness. This was theft dressed up as generosity. And then she added, "Patty told me you barely even use this part of your yard, Mr. Reynolds. It's completely legal." The so-called community improvement authorization raised immediate red flags. As I examined the document, I noticed inconsistent fonts, irregular signatures, and no notices of a board meeting ever arriving in our mailbox. There was no clear definition of temporary usage in the HOA bylaws, and suspiciously, the document didn't specify an end date for the usage. Patty showed up under the pretense of diffusing the tension, but instead, she doubled down. "Mr. Reynolds," she said coldly, "this is an approved enhancement for the neighborhood. Your resistance has been noted, and it will be addressed appropriately." She didn't stop there. She threatened me with fines for disrupting community unity, hinted that my behavior was antisocial, and warned there would be consequences if I continued challenging the board. This was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated operation. That night, I sat in my study going over deeds and HOA records, and it hit me with full force. This wasn't just a conflict over property. This was orchestrated corruption. Patty was funneling neighborhood assets directly to her relatives, hiding behind fake documents and board authority. I grabbed my phone and started dictating everything into voice memos. Day 1. HOA president asserts authority to hand over community property to her cousin. Paperwork appears fraudulent. Construction underway with 0 permits. This had gone far beyond a zoning issue. It was an entire scheme built around fake legality and shady manipulation. I had to record everything before they had the chance to erase their tracks. This wasn't just selfishness. This was planned. This was systemic. Then came the moment that broke me. Emma looked up at me, worry in her eyes. "Daddy, are we still allowed to live here?" I knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "This is our home, sweetheart. And tomorrow, I'm going to make sure everyone remembers that." I stared at her sketches of our lake pinned on the wall. Something shifted in me. My protective instinct surged like a tidal wave. "So let me ask you, what would you do if someone tried to wipe out everything you built for your family using forged paperwork?" Share your story in the comments. Maybe yours is even more unbelievable than mine. I treated this like any design projected: precise, documented, thorough. I had built this home with care and accuracy. I would dismantle their lies with the same precision. The forged documents gave themselves away. When I compared the whole letterhead with genuine copies from earlier notices, the differences were obvious. Signature analysis confirmed the handwriting didn't match any verified board signatures. Digging into the official HOA meeting records revealed there was never a vote approving Linda's construction. In fact, the date listed on her document corresponded to a time when most board members weren't even in town. My phone calls to them pulled the curtain back completely. Walter Hayes, the treasurer, sounded stunned. "Tom, I never signed anything. I was in Denver with my grandkids the entire week." Monica Cooper, the secretary, was just as baffled. "Emergency meeting? No one told me. I was in Seattle at my sister's wedding." Patty knew I was out of town. Dr. Patricia White, another board member, was furious. "That's supposed to be my signature? I haven't signed an HOA document in months," Something's seriously wrong here. It was becoming unmistakably every person who supposedly voted on this plan had been away when the meeting was said to have occurred. At City Hall, I discovered the full depth of the deception. A search of the permit database revealed 0 applications for Linda's construction. A check with the zoning office confirmed that waterslide installations require environmental assessments and legal clearances. None were filed. No inspections had ever occurred. And then I found the bombshell. Linda wasn't just using community property she had built directly on my land. Reviewing my deed again, it confirmed our lake rights extended to the high water line. I pulled out the property survey and saw it clearly. The base of the slide was 8 feet inside my legal boundary. This wasn't just home manipulation. This was full-on land theft using fraudulent documents. I stood there, seething. They weren't just violating regulations, they were committing real crimes. The scale was staggering. Linda's dock extended 12 feet into my property. A concrete slide foundation had been planted permanently on my land. Her tiki bar blocked all access to the shoreline I legally owned. Her massive speaker setup blasted into our space, violating noise codes. This wasn't neighborhood improvement. This was a deliberate, calculated land grab dressed up as community development. So I called an emergency home meeting. 15 neighbors showed up, including all board members. Patty and Linda arrived confidently, convinced they could bulldoze their way through opposition as usual. But I was prepared. I presented everything like a courtroom argument. Copies of the original property deeds were passed around. Photos of the encroachment violations were projected clearly. The absence of permits was highlighted on multiple displays. Witness statements from board members confirming the forged signatures were read out loud. As the evidence stacked up, I watched Patty's self-assurance drain from her face. In a last-ditch effort to recover, she launched into a dramatic outburst. Her face turned red, her voice shaking as she yelled, "Mr. Reynolds is sabotaging community progress with technical distractions." Then she pulled out yet another fake form, an emergency lake use authorization, clearly whipped up in haste. The so-called authorization Patty waved around had clearly been printed minutes before the meeting. She started claiming she had special executive authority to act in emergencies, something that doesn't exist anywhere in the HOA bylaws. Then she threatened me with $400 daily fines for obstructing community development, which was completely outside her legal power. Fake documents began multiplying like weeds. There was a board resolution 2024-15, backdated to seem official. A so-called community safety exemption was filled with legal jargon obviously copied off the internet. An interim usage agreement was riddled with intimidating, but ultimately meaningless, legal terms. The neighborhood's reaction unfolded just as I had predicted. Ron Peterson stood up, his experience in city planning giving his voice real weight. "Patty," he said firmly, "I worked in municipal planning for over 2 decades. These documents are absolute nonsense." Of course, Mrs. Wilson, one of Patty's loyal golf friends, jumped to her defense. "Maybe Tom could just share the lake. Isn't it better for the whole neighborhood?" Several residents, clearly shaken, said nothing. "We just want peace," one whispered. "Can't we all just get along?" But it was obvious that the fear was real. People didn't want to cross Patty because they knew what would come next. Then, it got personal. The very next day, Linda verbally confronted my daughter by the water. "I told you yesterday," she snapped. "This area is for adults now, no kids allowed." Emma came running back to me in tears, her voice trembling. "Daddy, a broken bar. The mean lady won't let me near the lake anymore. She says kids aren't allowed a broken bar." Watching her breakdown was soul-crushing. Her innocent confusion stirred something powerful inside me. Rage, determination. I knelt and hugged her tightly. "Sweetheart," I said, "sometimes when people take what belongs to us, we have to build boundaries to protect what we love." That night, I dove headfirst into research. Property laws, fencing ordinances, whole loopholes. Every legal option I had. I wrestled with myself. Am I taking this too far? Maybe I should just let it go. But then I remembered those tears, the stolen land, the fake documents. Some lines can't be uncrossed. So I started preparing. Every move would be legal, precise, and defensible. I filed fence permit applications with the city. I booked a licensed surveyor to officially mark the boundary lines. I documented every visible code violation with time-stamped photos, and I retained a property attorney with a $500 deposit. Then Ron Peterson showed up with something that shifted everything. "Tom," he said, "I worked in the city planning department for 20 years. I've been quietly tracking Patty's misconduct since she took over. My wife didn't want me to say anything because we got fined over our garden, but I've kept records. Lots of them." What Ron had compiled was shocking. He'd uncovered $8,000 worth of bogus fines handed out to homeowners. He documented fake permits Patty's team had sold to unsuspecting residents. There were rule changes made without any board votes. Even the HOA budget had unexplained expenses that pointed to misused funds. It hit me hard that this wasn't just about my lakefront. It was about the whole neighborhood. Patty wasn't enforcing rules. She was running a system of control targeting homeowners with desirable property or strong voices, hitting them with minor violations, then escalating into huge fines, until they caved in and hired her family's services. It was extortion, wrapped in community guidelines. This wasn't just theft of my land anymore. It was a theft from everyone, and they were using intimidation to keep us silent. My next step became clear. The planning phase would now be strategic. Tomorrow, I'd mark boundaries that they would never cross again. I spent the night studying fence blueprints, reviewing permit protocols, and cross-referencing property lines. Emma fell asleep curled up in my lap while I worked. I whispered to her sleeping form, "Daddy's going to fix this. I promise. No one will ever make you cry over our home again." But sometimes, uncovering stolen land leads you straight into stolen money and a crime serious enough to warrant prison. And a drama-nest family, tell me, should Tom expose the financial fraud too? Or just fight for his land? What would you risk to reveal the full truth? At sunrise, my fence crew arrived like a coordinated unit. They came with permits in hand, survey tools loaded, and professionalism that made it clear this wasn't amateur hour. "Gentlemen," I told them, "we're building exactly to code. Every inch of this fence will sit precisely on the boundary line. No more, no less." Preparation had been my weapon. A licensed surveyor marked the boundaries with GPS-level accuracy. Permits were displayed properly for everyone to see. My crew wasn't cheap day labor, it was skilled craftsmanship. Every material was chosen for strength, durability, and aesthetics. I wasn't just putting up a fence. I was building a monument, an immovable reminder that our rights still matter. And as the construction began, it moved with precision that would make any architect proud. Every stake hammered into the soil marked not just a linea but a stand. There was no room left for debate. I personally supervised each fence post as if I were designing a high-end architectural exhibit. My crew wasn't just skilled, they were fully licensed, insured, and armed with every required permit and city authorization. It was airtight. Soon, neighbors began gathering, sensing that they were about to witness the systematic dismantling of Linda's unauthorized backyard empire. The placement of the fence was surgical and devastating. A 6-foot privacy wall, drawn in perfect line along the property boundary, sliced straight through the base of Linda's oversized slide. It cut the tiki bar clean in two and landed right through the middle of her expensive speaker system, leaving one audio channel on my side and the other awkwardly blaring on hers. As the fence rose post by post, her $10,000 investment started looking more like a bizarre art installation than a fun family feature. The slide, now half usable, with one side fenced off like a crime scene. The diving zone, obstructed by thick fence posts. Her tiki bar, split right down the serving tray. Designer lounge chairs, divided by an impenetrable wooden wall. Watching my fence slice through their illegal setup was deeply satisfying. It felt like justice made tangibly. Every post hammered into the ground, another blow to their entitlement. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Linda, wrapped in a bathrobe and clutching her morning coffee, stepped outside the broken bar and froze. Her jaw dropped, her mug slipped through her fingers and shattered on the patio. "What the hell are you doing to my property?" she shrieked. I calmly took a sip of my own coffee and responded coolly, "Just building a fence on my property, with my permits." "Good morning, Linda." Panic swept across her face. She rushed along the fence line, frantically searching for a gap, an error, anything she could use to fight back. She called Patty mid-scream, ranted about destruction, demanded to see documentation. I handed her everything perfectly organized. She threatened to call the police. I encouraged her to do so. Soon enough, Patty arrived in a total frenzy, still in her bathrobe, hair curlers barely holding on. "This is destruction of community property," she yelled. "This is harassment. This ISA. I stayed composed. "This is my property, Patty. Same boundary it's had for the last 15 years. Her meltdown was epic. She dialed the police. They came, checked my permits, shrugged, and left. Then she called a city inspector, who confirmed everything was fully legal and approved. She screamed about community sabotage, threatened lawsuits, talked about deliberate terrorism, all with no legal backing. By mid-morning, half the neighborhood had gathered. The reaction was a show in itself. Gasps at first, then muffled giggles as Linda ran around in circles, then open laughter as Patty screeched helplessly, and finally applause. Real, spontaneous applause when the final fence post was hammered in. The teenager from next door caught the entire scene on video. I knew it was going to go viral. Car horns began honking from passers-by. Someone brought out a tub of popcorn. Another neighbor started live streaming the event. This was no longer just a dispute, it had become a live-action David versus Goliath showdown. Ron Peterson started a slow clap that quickly turned into a neighborhood celebration. Finally, someone had stood up to the bullies. The chant started, "Tom, Tom, Tom." Mrs. Stanley, who had once been fined $500 for planting unapproved rose bushes, approached me with teary eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing up when none of us could." For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt hopeful. Patty's grip of fear had cracked. People were no longer whispering in fear, they were laughing out loud. "Patty?" She completely unraveled. I mean full-scale meltdown. She was yelling so loudly that dogs 3 houses down started barking. "I am the president," she shrieked. "I gifted that land. You can't just ungift my gifts." She was literally jumping up and down in the middle of the lawn, ranting like a child denied dessert. The same woman who had strutted around like a queen just the day before now looked like a dethroned tyrant. "It was a family gift," she wailed. "A sacred family gift." It was surreal watching her unravel in front of a crowd she had once ruled through fear. Her face was red, veins bulging, and she was making noises that weren't even words anymore. Then came the moment I had meticulously planned for. The next morning, the city building inspector arrived, right on schedule. I had booked him before the fence went up. He reviewed Linda's unauthorized construction with growing concern. His expression said it all: disgust, disbelief, and professional irritation. After a thorough inspection, he tagged the water slide, "Built without permits. Remove immediately." He issued an $8,000 fine and a mandatory demolition order, 30 days to tear it down. Linda's shriek echoed across the lake. "But I have HOA approval." The inspector's response was exactly what you'd hope for: calm, direct, and firm. "Ma'am, HOA approval doesn't override city building regulations. This structure is completely illegal." What followed was a cascade of violations so severe, it was almost impressive. A waterfront project like Linda's required an environmental impact assessment and none had been done. No safety inspections had ever taken place. The setup violated zoning laws due to the use of commercial-grade equipment in a residential zone, and the booming sound system had already broken noise ordinances more than once. That once grand setup, now it was just an expensive monument to failure. The $10,000 slide was utterly useless, a half of it blocked by the fence, the other half unsafe. The fancy furniture arrangement was ruined, with fence panels cutting everything down the middle. Even the sound system was laughable, now left audio on one side, right on the other. The dock stopped right at the boundary, jutting out uselessly into open water. Linda stood in the middle of it all, wide-eyed and in disbelief. You destroyed everything. This was supposed to be for the community." I didn't raise my voice. I just told her the truth. "Community improvement starts with respecting boundaries, Linda." Then came the moment that made everything worth it. Emma ran over to the new fence, peeked through one of the slats, and gasped with excitement, "Daddy, I can see our lake again." I lifted her up onto my shoulders, and I swear I felt like the proudest father in the world. Yes, sweetheart. And now, no one can take that view away from us. Her next question hit me right in the heart. Can we swim today? I smiled, eyes full. We can swim every day now, baby. This is our home. Watching her laugh again, seeing her play by the water like she used HOA without fear or offense was worth every second of the fight. Linda, meanwhile, was spiraling. She began pacing back and forth like a panicked animal, clawing at the fence. My gift, a broken bar, my beautiful gift, a broken bar, she sobbed. Patty gave this to me. You can't just cut through a gift. It was almost surreal watching someone break down over property they never legally owned. She kept shouting about how this was family land, approved by the HOA, as if chanting it would make the fence vanish. But the truth was simple. You can't lose what was never yours. Standing there, I looked around at the wreckage of their scheme, neighbors applauding, Emma playing by the water, Patty and Linda fuming in the background, helpless. The fence didn't just reclaim our land, it stood for something much bigger: a respect, boundaries, and the end of their control. In that moment, I felt something deeper than pride. This was more fulfilling than any project I'd ever completed. Sometimes, the most meaningful thing you build isn't something new, it's the wall that protects what matters. This fence was a line in the sand. It said, enough, bullies can be stopped. What's yours is worth protecting. And yes, sometimes, you build walls not to shut people out, but to keep peace in. The real question is, when someone tries to steal everything you've worked for, how far are you willing to go to defend it? Tell me in the comments the most savage legal move you've ever seen someone pull. I know some of you have stories that would make this one look like a warm-up. But then, just a few days after I thought it was over, I received something that nearly knocked the wind out of me. A certified letter. Inside, a $25,000 lawsuit. The stack of legal papers was thick, intimidating, and packed with threatening legalese clearly meant to scare me into submission. They were accusing me of destroying $15,000 worth of HOA-approved community improvements, intentionally damaging the neighbor's property for $5,000 in punitive charges, and causing emotional distress, plus reducing property value another $5,000. And that's not even counting the open-ended legal fees and court costs. Reading through the claims, I felt a deep, gut-wrenching anxiety. It was so absurd it would be funny if it wasn't so dangerous. The lawsuit portrayed Linda as some sort of gifted family member, and claimed I had maliciously destroyed a family contribution blessed by HOA leadership. They tried to dress up blatant nepotism in legal jargon. Every page described Linda's backyard monstrosity as a family-focused community enhancement gifted through HOA authority, like repeating those words enough would magically make them lawful. When I finally sat down with my attorney, the reality hit like a wrecking ball. Tom, he said, this isn't a bluff. They filed in civil court, with a legitimate attorney. If this goes sideways, you could lose $25,000 in damages, not to mention your own legal fees. You're staring down a possible $40,000 total loss. Suddenly, this wasn't just principally, it was financial survival. My savings totaled around $30,000, money set aside for Emma's college fund. Just the defense alone would cost at least $15,000. If I lost, we'd be wiped out. Emma's future, a broken bar gone. That night, alone in my home office, I stared at her crayon drawings taped to the wall. My chest felt like it was caving in. Was I about to throw everything away? Would defending our home ruin her dreams? I sat there, overwhelmed, wondering if I had the strength to keep fighting. The service provides an opportunity to voice any of your texts, including articles, reports, separate chapters, or entire book in a sequence, no more than 30,000 characters at a time. The name of the MP3 file is formed from the first 20 characters of the text. Save the generated MP3 file to your device for storing and future use offline. Please select language and voice. Adjustable speed, pitch and pauses between sentences and paragraphs. Replace this text with yours. I laid it all out, clear, straightforward, and impossible to ignore, making sure everyone fully understood what had really been happening under Vera's leadership. But let's be real, there was definitely some satisfaction in knowing that Vera was finally about to get a dose of her own poison. The email opened with a quick recap of the fence dispute, including Vera's threat to auction off my property. Then I dove straight into the bombshell, the survey results. I attached photos showing the clearly marked stakes, the official property measurements, and a detailed breakdown of exactly which HOA structures were illegally built on my land. But here's where it got juicy. I ended the email by announcing my own property auction. Since Mrs. Vant believed auctions were the right way to resolve community matters, I figured I'd follow her lead. I wrote, "I've decided to auction off the land rights beneath Mrs. Vant's house. If auctions are fair game, then so is mine. I'm just playing by her rules." Oh, I knew that line would grab attention, but that wasn't the main goal. What I really wanted was for people to see the truth. The same woman who tried to take my home had been stealing from me for 8 years. Looking back, it's the kind of tale people love to hear. The bully finally meets their match. But living it, whole different story. I hit send at exactly 10 p.m. Friday night. The broken bar then sat back, waiting for the neighborhood to light up, and boy, did it. My phone started ringing within minutes. Apparently, even on a Friday night, nothing grabs attention like HOA drama. The first few calls were from neighbors trying to wrap their heads around what they'd just read. "Harlan, did you really say Vera's house is sitting on your land? Are you actually going to auction off her lot? Is this some kind of joke?" I calmly walked each of them through the situation and the survey data, the legal implications, all of it. By midnight, I'd taken at least 15 calls. Each one was a mix of disbelief, outrage, and that classic neighborhood curiosity. The most common reaction? "The broken bar. She tried to auction your place while she was on your land?" Yeah, the hypocrisy hit like a truck. Saturday morning came with even more feedback. Some folks were cheering me on. "Good for you, Harlan. She had it coming." Others were clearly panicking. "This is getting out of control. Can't we just handle this quietly?" But the most eye-opening calls were from people sharing their experiences with Vera. Turns out, I wasn't her first target. One woman on Oak Street told me Vera made her tear out her vegetable garden because it didn't match the community aesthetic. A man from Pine Avenue had to repaint his entire house because Vera thought the color was too bold. Story after story painted a pattern. Vera had been intimidating and controlling neighbors for years. My fence? Just the latest excuse for her power plays. But the call I'd been expecting finally came around noon. Vera, and she was furious. "You can't do this," she screamed. "This is harassment. This is extortion. I'll sue you for everything." I let her vent for a few minutes before responding as calmly as I could. "Vera, I'm just following your lead. You taught me how property auctions work. Remember, you said it was the best way to settle neighborhood disputes." The silence on the other end, glorious. It was so quiet I wondered if she'd passed out. When she finally spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, worn down. "Harlan, please see broken bar. We can work something out. My grandkids visit that house. It's not just bricks to me." Broken bar. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered how casually she threatened to take my home. And just like that, the sympathy disappeared. This was about making her feel exactly what she had tried to make me feel, the fear of losing everything. The whole weekend, the neighborhood buzzed. People picked sides. Team Harlan was growing fast. As more stories about Vera's reign of terror came to light, folks were starting to connect the dots. Even her loyal supporters were having second thoughts. She'd been trespassing on my land for 8 years, all while threatening to auction my house over a legal fence. It didn't sit right with anyone. Saturday became a blur of phone calls and door knocks. Neighbors wanted details. Some were scared about their own property lines. Others were just hyped to see someone finally take on Vera. One thing was clear. Vera had been ruling the whole like her personal kingdom for way too long, and the walls were finally closing in. By Sunday evening, I made it official. The auction was set for next Saturday, 10 a.m., at the community center. In a follow-up email, I added, "All are welcome. Might as well turn Vera's drama into an open house." I kept it light, but the message, crystal clear. This was happening. As I hit send on that email, I felt a strange mix of pride and uncertainty. On one hand, it felt good to finally stand up to someone who had been misusing power for years. But part of me wondered, a broken bar. Was I about to become the neighborhood hero, or the neighborhood villain? I didn't know yet. But one thing was certain, Vera had started this war. with her arrogance, her threats, and her auction nonsense. And I was going to finish it in a way no one in Maple Grove would ever forget, because now, everyone knew exactly who the land belonged to. Saturday morning arrived with that crisp October air that always makes the day feel a little more electric. It was going to be a day Maple Grove would talk about for a long time. I'd brought in a seasoned auctioneer, Jim Morrison. He'd been handling estate and property auctions in our county for over 2 decades. He set everything up professionally at the community center. Word had spread far beyond just our neighborhood. Calls started coming in from the next county over people curious about the so-called revenge auction. Honestly, who would have thought a property line fight over a fence would turn into one of the biggest suburban dramas in town history? Even a local newspaper reporter had called, asking for an interview. But I figured it was better to let the event speak for itself. By 9:45 a.m., the community center was absolutely packed. I'd expected a decent turnout from Maple Grove residents, but this was next level. The room could barely hold 30 people during home meetings, and now, there were over 60 inside, many of whom I didn't recognize. Some were neighbors, sure, but others were spectators, potential buyers, maybe even more journalists following the story that was spreading like wildfire. The atmosphere felt like a courtroom moments before the jury returned with a verdict. Some folks gave me encouraging nods, like I was their champion. Others stared at me like I'd lit a match in a fireworks warehouse. A few looked genuinely anxious about what was about to unfold. Phones were out. People were taking pictures, recording video. I knew right then that what started in Maple Grove was about to go far beyond it. Then Vera walked in. She arrived at 9:55, looking nothing like the commanding figure she once was. Her shoulders were slumped, her expression hollow, like someone haunted by a night full of regrets. No board members by her side, no legal counsel, just Vera, sitting alone in the front row, staring straight ahead at Jim Morrison as he prepared his materials. When our eyes met, I saw something in her eye I had never seen before. Fear, real, human fear, not the kind that gets angry and lashes out, but the kind that knows the damage is already done and there's no way to undo it. For a split second, I almost hesitated. Was this too far? But then I remembered her threats, her smug confidence when she tried to auction off my home, and whatever doubt I had evaporated. At exactly 10 a.m., Jim tapped the microphone and called the room to order. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're here today to auction the land rights for Lot 27, Maple Grove Estates. This property is currently occupied by Mrs. Verna Vance. Bidding will begin at $50,000 for exclusive land rights, with the understanding that any existing structures must renegotiate occupancy with the winning bidder." The room went completely still. You could feel the tension settle over everyone like a heavy blanket. I saw Vera visibly recoil in her chair. Some people shifted in their seats, finally beginning to grasp the seriousness of the situation. A few whispered to each other, glancing between me and Vera. They weren't sure if this was poetic justice or full-blown warfare. And then, unexpectedly, Vera stood up. "This is wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "He's trying to take my home. I made one mistake about a property line, and now he's destroying everything I've built." For a moment, no one said a word. The silence was thick. Some people looked uncomfortable, unsure who to believe. But then a neighbor from Oak Street rose and responded, calm and direct. "One mistake, Vera? You tried to sell his land over a fence that was fully legal." Then the floodgates opened. Voices from the crowd started piling on, sharing years of pent-up frustration. "She made me repaint my house twice." Someone shouted. "She threatened me over a vegetable garden." Another neighbor added. The room transformed into a roar of long-suppressed grievances. People had been holding on to these stories for years, so some of them had clearly been waiting for this moment. When the bidding finally began, it started slowly. Many of the neighbors were visibly uneasy. $50,000 wasn't exactly pocket change, especially not for a neighborhood dispute. But then a few outside investors raised their paddles. 60,000, 65, and the numbers began to climb. The bidding climbed at $70,000, then higher. Each new bid brought Vera closer to breaking down completely, and the tension in the room was almost unbearable. From the back of the room, I watched it all unfold, torn between a strange sense of justice and something that felt a lot like regret. Vera had spent years threatening my home and quietly encroaching on my land, but watching her unravel in front of the entire neighborhood wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Some of our neighbors were clearly reveling in the spectacle, whispering, snickering. Others looked deeply uncomfortable, unsure how to feel. When the bidding hit $75,000, Vera made a desperate attempt to outbid, but it was obvious she didn't have the funds. She was in tears, begging anyone around her to help, promising she'd remove anything built on my land and resign as HOA president, just to make it stop. The room grew tense again. The drama had reached its peak. Some people were glued to the moment, others fidgeted in their seats, unsure if it had gone too far. Jim Morrison, the auctioneer, began his final chant, "Going on, see a broken bar, going twice, see a broken bar," and just like that, my chest tightened. In a matter of seconds, Vera would lose her home, and I'd be the one responsible, the guy who brought down the Queen of Maple Grove. Looking at her shattered, trembling, I had to confront something deep within myself. Was I really restoring balance here, or was I just swinging the same weapon she once used to control us? Jim's gavel hovered in the air. I had 5 seconds to choose what kind of man I was going to be. Then I raised my hand. I bid $80,000. The room went dead still. You could have heard a pin drop. Vera turned to me, stunned. Her expression was a mix of shock, disbelief, a broken bar, and the faintest flicker of hope. She couldn't understand why I would bid on land I already legally owned. But this wasn't about ownership anymore. This was about showing everyone in that room and Vera what real leadership looked like. As the final bidder, I now held the legal right to do whatever I wanted with the land beneath Vera's house, and I could have used that power to crush her. But true justice, I believe, doesn't always need to destroy. Sometimes, it's about giving someone a chance to rebuild. I stood up and addressed the silent room, every set of eyes glued to me. I never wanted Vera to lose her home, I began, my voice clear and steady. I wanted her to know what it feels like to have your home, your safety, your life's work threatened by someone else. Now that she understands that feeling, a broken bar, maybe we can start fresh, all with real foundations. Vera looked at me through her tears, hopeful and shaken. I'm willing to offer you a fair lease agreement, Vera, I continued, but there are conditions. The crowd stirred again, buzzing in anticipation. First, I said, you resign immediately and permanently as HOA president. Second, you help draft new community rules, ones that actually support the neighborhood instead of giving you unchecked power to harass people. And third, you provide fair compensation for the 8 years you've used my property without permission. Vera nodded so fast I thought her head might fall off. Yes, she said through sobs. Yes, anything. Thank you. The tension began to lift like a storm finally passing. Relief washed over the room. Some neighbors started to clap, others just smiled, visibly moved. What they had expected to be a scene of total destruction had turned into a surprising display of grace. Some were clearly impressed. Others, maybe a little disappointed there wouldn't be more drama. But for most, it was a relief to see this feud end without completely ruining someone's life. A man from Cedar Drive stood up and clapped, and soon the whole room followed. The applause wasn't for me personally, it was for the decision, for the way things ended with fairness, not fire. Even the outside investors who had been bidding seemed to appreciate the outcome. In the weeks that followed, we got to work on rebuilding the HOA from the ground up. We threw out the intimidation tactics that had plagued the community under Vera's reign. In their place, we established new procedures: transparent votes, open discussions, fair policies, no more threats of property seizures over trivial complaints, no more dictatorship disguised as leadership. Anna Drummond had become the catalyst for change, not through destruction, but through something much more powerful: accountability, redemption, a broken bar, and a little bit of mercy. One-person rule masked as community standards became a thing of the past. We introduced an annual leadership rotation so that no one could ever again hold the kind of unchecked power that had clouded Vera's judgment. Most importantly, we made it mandatory for the HOA to get written consent from property owners before building anything that could impact their land. It's amazing how smoothly things work when you actually respect the law and each other instead of ruling with fear and threats. Once the lawyers stepped in, the property dispute was resolved quickly. The HOA agreed to remove every structure they'd built on my land within 30 days and pay $25,000 for 8 years of unauthorized use. My fence, it stayed right where it belonged and now officially recognized as legal and correctly placed on my property. We mapped out and documented clear boundaries for every lot in the neighborhood and passed new rules that required written consent from homeowners before building any community structure. Turns out, when you treat people like human beings instead of obstacles, the process becomes a whole lot simpler. The legal work wrapped up in about 6 weeks, and by Thanksgiving, everything was finally settled. 6 months later, the change in our neighborhood was unbelievable. Property values actually went up thanks to our new, fair, and transparent HOA system. People started moving into Maple Grove not in spite of the HOA, but because of it. One real estate agent even called it the fairest HOA in the county. Gone were the days of silent compliance with ridiculous rules. Neighbors weren't afraid to speak up anymore. No more HOA bullies tossing out ultimatums like expired coupons. Instead of tension-filled meetings, we had real community events, and people finally began to enjoy living here. The transformation was incredible. Neighbors smiled, talked, and even waved instead of avoiding eye contact like we were all in some dystopian suburb. Vera, to her credit, honored every promise. She stepped down as president, played a key role in drafting our new guidelines, and paid her share of the restitution without a single complaint. Shockingly, she seemed genuinely relieved. Freed from the burden of control, she became a broken bar decent. Happier, even, she started volunteering at the local animal shelter and spent time gardening. When I walk past, she sometimes waves and I wave back. It's wild how different someone can be when they stop trying to dominate the world around them. One day, she even said to me, "Thank you for showing me who I used to be." I never thought I'd hear that. Now, as I sit on my porch and look at the very same stone fence that sparked this wild ride, I smile. It's still standing strong, still stunning, and still right where it belongs and on my land. My horses graze peacefully in the distance, and neighbors actually wave when they pass by. That unauthorized fence Vera once hated, it's now something of a local landmark. People point it out to guests. That's the fence that brought down the HOA queen. Newcomers even ask about it when house hunting in the area. Funny how things change. This whole experience taught me something I didn't expect. The loudest voices often stand on the weakest foundations. Vera's power wasn't real. It was built on silence, on people too tired or scared to resist. But once someone stood up with truth instead of fear, it all came crashing down. Sure, I could have destroyed her publicly and legally, but sometimes, real justice isn't about breaking some it's about standing your ground, a broken bar, and then offering a bridge back. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button or leave a comment. It truly makes a difference. And if you'd like to support the channel, that thanks button is right below. No pressure. This is Anna Dramanest, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss what's next, because trust me, things only get wilder from here.